All right, hey everybody, welcome to Think Tank. This week's version, we're going to talk about volunteering in tech. I'm here with Laura.
Hi everybody.
So I'm Gray. I work at Thinkful. I do operations stuff here with the ed team. Laura is on community.
Yes.
And today we've got a few people who are involved in various ways in volunteering or in contributing to the open source community. We've got Ethan, Jeff, Linda, and Nathaniel. And I'll let everybody take a moment to introduce themselves. Ethan, I'm going to start with you since you're on my left.
Sure. My name is Ethan. It's a pleasure to see everybody or whoever is watching.
The entire internet.
The entire world.
The entire internet.
So right now I teach programming, mainly front-end web development at General Assembly. I've been doing that for about 2 years now, right when General Assembly started in LA. So I kind of got my in there as a student, actually. So when they first started, I was a student trying to, refresh my skills that I picked up over the years since, like I said, since Windows 98 when I started programming. I was very interested in what General Assembly was doing, and I heard about them out in New York, and I was thrilled when they came to LA. So I decided, hey, I'll take a class there, and 2 years later, I'm doing the lead instruction for the front-end course. And that's kind of me right now. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, awesome. So Jeff, you're kind of next in on my view. Jeff, you do a lot of open source stuff and like a few other things. Why don't you say hi and talk a little bit about what you're involved in?
Hey, hope my sound is coming through okay. I'm Jeff. Great. I'm Jeff. I'm a mentor for Thinkful, which is just wonderful. And I work at a company called Carrot, which is owned by Vice in Brooklyn. And I work on open source full-time, which is a really fantastic opportunity to have. I work across a pretty wide variety of tools and libraries for making my company more efficient, but all of my work is public and out in the open, and so feel free to check it out if you want. Can ask me about it later.
In particular, Jeff is a genius on GitHub, and check out Roots if you haven't. And if you're
Genius with a J.
Yeah, with a J. And if you're into node stuff, check it out.
That was a name from a while ago, but yeah, I can link that stuff up later if you want. But yeah, I spend a lot of time with Git. I spend a lot of time with GitHub, and I love working on open source projects. So that's what I'm here for.
Awesome. So we also have Linda. Linda, why don't you say hi and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name's Linda. I work as a front-end developer at a company called We Also Walk Dogs. I got into programming kind of after college, so I didn't take any CS courses. And I remember it was very difficult trying to learn by yourself, but I ended up going to a lot of tech meetups and hackathons, and what I discovered was that I really, really enjoyed talking to other people about web development. I blog at a website called thecodingdiaries.com, and lately I've been spending a lot of my weekends working on connecting people via online study group hangouts at a project called codebuddies.org. And I'm pretty excited to hear the discussion and participate in what comes afterwards today.
I think the only question we have there is when do you sleep? But I will leave it to Nathaniel right now to tell us about all the amazingness he's got going on at Teals.
Hi everyone. So my name is Nathaniel Granor. I used to be a software engineer working at Microsoft in Redmond, and while I was there, I started volunteering with an organization called Teals. And Teals had us going into high schools in Seattle and helping to teach computer science. So I've since moved back east, closer to where I grew up. I live in New York City, and I'm now the regional director for the Teals program. And Teals itself has grown from a couple schools in Seattle to 135 schools around the country, pairing up software engineers with teachers who don't know computer science so that together they can offer computer science classes in high schools. Teals is part of the Microsoft's Youth Spark initiative, which is working to empower youth around the world, hundreds of millions of kids, so it's a part of that.
It's amazing. How did you start getting involved with it? How did you even discover that Teals existed?
Yeah, I got an email in an internal alias at like a distribution list at Microsoft that was, I think it was an alumni from Yale where I attended, and it was just like, who wants to teach? And I've always been interested in that. I find that teaching and sort of explaining things is one of the best ways to reinforce your own knowledge, and it's also incredibly satisfying. So that was it was exactly what I was looking for at that moment in time, to get up at 5:45 so that I could drive into Seattle, spend an hour teaching, and then drive the horrible commute from Seattle back to the east side, if anyone's from that area. But it was a really but it was a really satisfying experience, and so now here I am helping literally hundreds of other software engineers participate in the same program.
Fantastic. It seems like the altruism won out over the masochism, so it's good to hear.
Yeah.
Well, so Linda, you do a lot of stuff in person in addition to the work that you do online. How did you first get involved in volunteering, like in person?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, well, first, I think I want to define volunteering not as like a specific program that you apply to and register for and commit to weekly, but I think volunteering in the tech world can also involve just being a part of the community, being present at events and meetups. And from the volunteering work, I've seen a lot of people, like senior developers or even people who are just starting out, they volunteer by going to events like Railsbridge, which is a national, I guess it's a national organization that hosts events to bring women into learning Ruby on Rails. And but even if you don't sign up for something like Railsbridge, you can go to a Python meetup at your local city, and you can help someone debug their Python installation. Or there are lots of ways to be engaged at meetups. And I think of volunteering as a sense of just connecting with other people and helping when they need help, or oftentimes what you'll get out of it is that you get advice yourself from other people. So I mean, I kind of just started, I don't know if it's really volunteering, but I've just started going to some of these meetups, and I found them really enjoyable.
Yeah, awesome. I think that ties into some of what Nathaniel was talking about, right? About finding teaching very, very fulfilling work. Jeff, you do teaching work. You also do a lot of open source stuff. And one of the questions I get most frequently from people who are just getting started in software development is like, I use all this open source stuff. How do I get started in contributing to open source projects? So how did you? Do you remember when you got started actually contributing to some projects? Can you talk a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, I have like a really long answer to that, so I'll try to abbreviate it as much as I can. But yeah, I get that question a lot as well. A lot of people have asked me, how do I find projects to contribute to? I think the question itself is a little bit misguided, just because nobody just trolls around the internet, like, going around GitHub, like, looking for a project that seems like maybe they should add a pull request to it. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I contribute, and most people that I know that also contribute heavily to open source contribute to projects that they care about and that they use. I get paid to work on open source by my company, which is awesome. But the stuff that I work on usually not only helps out other people, but also in some way helps out the company as well. So it's usually projects that I'm using that I get involved with, and some projects are really solid and I don't need to get involved in them, right? Like if I find a bug in a project, rather than filing an issue, I'll usually put in a fix for it, because I know what it's like to maintain an open source library. And it's great when someone's willing to help out rather than just be like, hey, can you just do this work for me? Especially when it's in an obnoxious manner. People, you quickly forget that, like, you know, somebody's working hard to make this free software for you. When you're, like, getting angry about a bug that you found in it, you know, it's kind of unreasonable.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're paying them for it, like, you might have the right to be a little bit angry about it, but, like, especially when it's something that's free and that's a volunteer basis and they're giving it to you to try to make your life easier, it's kind of like a different mindset that you have to be coming from, which is that, like, we're in this together, you know, you're using it, you know, I made it, or you made it, I'm using it, so let's work together and make this a better tool. So oftentimes it's when I pick up something that looks interesting and I find somewhere that there might be like a bug in it that I could fix, or I have an idea of a feature that could be added to make it easier to use. And that's when I'll, like, start up a conversation with a person that's maintaining the library and say, hey, what do you think about this? You know, I'm here, I'm using your work, thank you so much for making it, it's really useful, I want to get involved and help to make it better.
Yeah, I think the community... Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying, almost every project that I work on, I'm contributing to different libraries, just because every project, I work at an agency, so we do a lot of different projects rather than working on one product. And almost every project has different requirements, and you know, the more work I do in open source myself, the more frequently I find myself giving back to 3-4 different projects that are helping out with a piece of any, like, given piece of client work, which is awesome. And it's really cool to, you know, get involved with different people. You can learn a lot from seeing how other people work with stuff. You can learn a lot about working with other people by working with such a large variety of them. And there's just a lot of great benefits.
Yeah, so you mentioned community, and I think like learning to navigate the open source community can be a little tricky for people, and is definitely worth paying attention to for those who are interested in doing it. Ethan, do you remember your first kind of foray into that? Like, you know,
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
The first project, I think Jeff may agree. The first project I worked on was an old SSH client called Putty. And it was, the way I got into it was simply because I needed to use it, and it wasn't working. So I pulled it down, I modified it, and then I was running it locally, and it was working. And then I said, well, I guess I kind of fixed this, so I should push it back up. So I emailed the owner of the repo, and he was like, oh, yeah, looks like there was a little bug there. And so like Jeff said, it did come out of, like, not only a use case, but it's something I needed to use. And it's something, you know, obviously not just me. There's a lot of people out there that need to use a system like Putty. But again, that's a long time ago.
Very cool. So I think a big question that a lot of people have when they're considering different types of involvement is, you know, how much of a commitment is this? How involved do I need to be? What's going to be expected of me?
Well, let's just take a step back and mention a couple of different ways I think
Sure.
that you can volunteer your time. I think that you can, you know, work on open source code. I think that you can be a teacher, like you guys are speaking to. I also think that being a participant or a volunteer, to what Linda said about just showing up. My first hackathon, I had never written a line of code, but I knew how to share stories on the internet, so that worked out. I also think being an organizer is a totally different world than being a mentor and doing one-on-one things. So I just wanted to kind of make sure that we got that out there so you knew your options.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, commitment. Back to that question. So, Nathaniel, for the people who get involved with Teals, what do you guys usually ask of them? How big of a commitment is that?
So yeah, Teals, and I agree with what everyone's talking about. Volunteering is a broad space. There's so many ways to get involved. And so, you know, if you think of it as a spectrum with multiple dimensions, one dimension is that time commitment. Teals is definitely at a far end of that spectrum. You know, we ask for our participants in the program to come in and teach 2 to 3 times a week usually. They're usually working in a group of 3 or 4 volunteers along with the classroom teacher. So, you know, we like to have at least 1 volunteer in the classroom every day, but preferably 2, since students will spend a lot of time working on projects and labs where having that one-on-one relationship will be really useful. So we're looking for people to come in about 2 to 3 times a week. It's almost always first period, so you can come in before work and then still be the first one at your office, since hours tend to be a little late in the tech community. And on top of the actual teaching, planning for class and helping out with grading are really important as well. So it can I'd say it averages out. Right now, so school right here in New York City, school started yesterday for most schools, and this time of year is going to be probably the biggest crunch for our volunteers because it's their first time in the classroom. They are getting used to everything they need. They're just learning about how to polish up a lesson plan and make a worksheet and all of those things. And of course, we have resources to support them, but so it's probably busiest right now. But once they get into the groove, you're probably talking about 5 or 6 hours a week, which is a pretty big commitment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Nathaniel, I don't know if you're on the New York City Ed Tech meetup group mailing list, but we had a conversation on there pretty recently related to another one of these hangouts between a few people about the difficulty of finding primary school educators who have the background in computer science in order to effectively teach school kids about this stuff in school. And it's pretty tough because the demand for engineers is so high, compensation is so much higher than you find in education that it's really hard to find talented people who are great software developers and also educators.
And that's totally true. Code.org did a study last year, and they estimate liberally that there are slightly less than 10% of U.S. public schools are teaching some form of computer science. And that's a liberal estimate. It's probably lower than that. And so, Teals is one of a growing movement of programs trying to help bring computer science into schools. Here in New York City, there's a whole bunch of organizations. I know you've met on this show with folks from ScriptEd, Coder Dojos. There's all kinds of programs just now trying to get into the schools, and the biggest problem they face is that teacher capacity issue, where the teachers, there just aren't a lot of teachers who have the background that they need. And so programs like Teals are helping. We're just helping to bolster the teachers. Our goal is to work with the school for a couple years, get that teacher off the ground, and then they're able to keep flying, and we start working with another school. So hopefully in 10 years, Teals will have worked itself out of existence.
So that's a lofty goal.
It is.
Yeah, cool. As I kick the microphone. So Linda, I think a lot of the open kind of meetup stuff that you blogged about before, and the flexible online stuff has a really varied time commitment. If somebody has only a couple or a few hours a week, or can't commit themselves to a weekly schedule every week, are you familiar with ways that they can effectively still get involved? Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, it's been really interesting figuring out times for people to get involved. One of the things I've realized is that if you don't live in New York City or San Francisco or one of the big tech communities, it can be very difficult to go out to one of those meetups or hackathons and volunteer in person. So what I've been trying to do lately, or what I've been more experimenting.
How do people get involved in your study groups? You're online, okay. Amazing.
So yeah, so my side project, it's called codebuddies.org, and we've had a couple of hangouts where people just send out a proposal, a time to meet, and that's helpful for people who can't make the commute to a physical location. And hangouts are convenient because you can just jump online from anywhere. We mute our videos to save bandwidth. And then the other cool thing about hangouts is that with Google Hangouts, you can screen share. So what we've had is that at a few hangouts, everyone screen shares, and that really helps people get through the tutorial better. So sorry, that's a little bit diverging from the question. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are ways for people to participate and volunteer if you can't be at a physical location through And I mean, what's also interesting about the audience that I've hung out with recently is that a lot of them aren't jumping on because they solely want to teach. A lot of them are jumping on because they also want to learn themselves. So I think, I mean, this is a theme I think that's prevalent with volunteering in general. You learn a lot from having to explain concepts to people, whether it's kids or other adults. And
yeah, I think it's pretty cool. So the going into a classroom and teaching computer science in a school requires a lot more of a background than many people might have who are interested in contributing some of their time. So I think it's really interesting that you and you get into this stuff on your blog, that there are ways to get involved even if you aren't super confident that you're like an expert in any of these topics.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question for you as well, Linda. How do most people end up hearing about Coding Buddies? Is it through a buddy online? Like, how are you distributing and spreading out the word?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't really worked too hard on spreading the word. I think a lot of people actually heard because I blogged a post about where I interviewed some people about how they learned how to code, and that got some traffic from Reddit because one of the people I interviewed posted there. So I don't know. I'm still, I guess, working on that. But it's still like an experiment in progress because I think there is a lot of value that people can get from just meeting virtually when they're learning to different various web technologies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So Jeff, how much do you need? So in order to fix a problem in a project that you're actually using and working with, you need like a certain degree of technical competency, right? You need to identify that there's a problem, and then you need to be able to fashion a solution to it. But like, what kind of beyond that, what technical competencies would you say are required in order to like effectively contribute to somebody else's open source project?
That was an abrupt transition, but make this happen.
Well, I've heard a lot of people who have been demoralized. They say, I spent so long. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't call you right there. But to answer the question, I mean, I think based on the same theme we've been talking about, which is trying to contribute to things you are using or are using in some way. If you're using a project, like if you have a Node.js project you're working on and you're using a Node.js library, chances are you probably know how to code. Same with more or less anything else. So it comes a little bit easier because if you're using it, then you probably understand at least at a very basic level the language.
But there are people who have spent, they'll say, I spend my entire day working on something, I'll submit a pull request, and I'll never hear anything back. Or my code will get ripped to shreds, and it's super demoralizing. Can you give me suggestions?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, I mean, as a maintainer, there's a lot of things you have to be careful of. There's a lot of people that are new that are contributing. So, if you're like a veteran, maintainer of a library, you still have to be careful to like make sure that you're being nice to everybody and that you're really confusing people. And some people do a good job of that, and other people don't, as is the case with pretty much everything in life. So that's definitely true, but at the same time, you do have to expect review. If you're submitting code to someone in the library, every line of code you wrote is going to be looked up. And if there's a mistake, then they're going to let you know. That's something that you learn pretty quickly as a programmer in general, that you really can't take it personally when your stuff gets reviewed. It's for the better. I remember when I was starting, when I was just starting out as a coder, I would get really offended when they would like QA my project and be like, "There's a bug here." I'd be like, "Oh, this is an outrage." They're like, but now I really appreciate it because when there's somebody else who's QAing my code, that's work that I don't have to do. I'm like, "Thank you for catching that," and now I'm fixing it. And so I guess there's sort of two steps to it, right? One half of it is that that as a maintainer of a project that people are contributing to, you have to try to be gentle and help and not kind of rash and harsh when people are offering contributions, even if they're really stupid, which there are a lot of. Don't get me wrong. I get a lot of really, really stupid issues, really stupid pull requests that just don't make any sense. I could be like, oh, you huge idiot, you know, like what's right? I mean, but you try not to do that and just be like, I'm not sure I totally understand what you're aiming for here. Like, could you explain this further? Or like, you know, you could probably remove this line of code and, you know, it would still work fine. Or could you know, squash these two commits together since they're very similar without having to be like disparaging. And to be honest, even against all of my attempts, there was one in particular, this kind of ridiculous story, who put up a pull request, and I was like, they're like removed. It was like this is two technical deals, but they like removed a really important part of the library because they just like didn't really know how to deal with it, and they're like, sorry, but to make this fix, I just like removed this large chunk of code that's like essential for the rest of it. And I was like, you really need that actually. You know, is there any way you can make the fix and keeping it in there? And they're like, no, I'm finished with this. And closed the pull request and then deleted their entire GitHub account. And I was like, wow, that was quite a reaction. And then I got an email from them. I don't know how they got my email address, but I got an email from some person. They were like, please, like, don't touch my code again. I just wanted to contribute, and my code was subpar, and I'm ashamed, and now I never will use GitHub again. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, so it's hard, and particularly when you're dealing with a lot of people online, right? To kind of maintain civility with everybody, even, and you know, text communication isn't always the best way to communicate emotions.
Yeah.
So that's challenging.
Yeah,
You have to be really careful though on both sides. Like if you're starting out, expect a harsh reaction is the best way you can prepare yourself. I mean, you probably won't get one. Most people are reasonable and try to be nice. And honestly, if you ask for help, most maintainers are willing to help you. I've worked together for a while with some people who have tried to contribute. I've asked them to like squash two commits together. They said they don't know how to do it, and we like work together to like learn more about Git. And like that's great. I love it. Fantastic. As long as you're willing to like work together and learn. And you know, there's stuff that I've learned from contributing. But as long as you're just not like taking anything too personally, and you're just open to collaboration, and the mindset is like, all personal issues aside, let's make this better, then it usually will go well. You know?
Yeah, awesome. So Ethan, what do you find like in person when you're you know teaching folks? What do you find are some of the most challenging parts of what you do?
Well, initially I wanted to interject a little bit when Jeff was talking, but in all of the classrooms at General Assembly, we actually have a poster on the wall that says "Learn to fail, and then learn to code," because essentially you're gonna fail a lot, and you kind of have to learn to accept defeat. But in that defeat, you're getting better. You're learning something. So, you know, like Jeff said, maybe we can push those two commits together. You know, the first time, well, so I don't know where I'm going with that. But the hard things that I run into in the classroom when I'm teaching is gauging the different levels of understanding, because obviously you have some people that really, really understand the material, and then you have some people that really, really don't. I guess that's also diverging off the question. The challenges. So what was the question again?
Just what challenges you face. I mean, online, I think dealing with the impersonality of it can be challenging.
Right.
You know, so yeah, I was just wondering if you ran into any challenges in person. I guess I can also ask Nathaniel. So, like Nathaniel, when you have software developers going into the classroom? Like, what are some of the big challenges that they face?
Yeah, I think honestly, what Ethan said, differentiated instruction, that idea that students move at different paces, is probably the #1 challenge in any classroom of a given, of a reasonable size. That just people move at different speeds, and what techniques can you come up with to automate your classroom? So having students work with each other can be very powerful. Take your advanced students and have them work with less advanced students, and together they're going to be able to do more. Having extra assignments or having scaled back versions of assignments and work is really useful as well. Other challenges, though, and this sort of relates to what Jeff was saying, that experts, right? A lot of the people who are participating are experts, and the students we work with are not experts. So that expert bias, knowing how much you know and realizing how little the other person may know, and how you can get from A to B, can be another really big challenge when you're teaching.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, and I'd also say, the point about finding a study partner or finding someone close to the same level, maybe slightly more advanced, can be really helpful because they identify more with the challenges that you're facing than someone who's too far advanced could be could really understand. And also, I just want to make a quick point. Back to the idea of online volunteering. IRC is also something I've heard a lot of people mention as a good way to contribute to open source. Like if you see an open source repository and has a link to an IRC channel, then that's a good way to chat with other people in real time, which helps with the sending a pull request and not getting a response problem.
I think that it's almost about that time to wrap up, so I have one last question for you guys, and it's kind of along the same vein. My question is, what are the benefits of getting involved, and how can we rally the troops and get people excited to help you guys out? How do they get involved? And I guess we'll start with you, Nathaniel, and work to the left as far as bobbing heads are concerned. But how do we get all our faithful students and the world and then some to champion your cause?
Sorry, was that me? I didn't hear who you pointed.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, it's easy to sit around at home and watch Netflix. It's harder to actually get up off your butt and do something. There are so many options that we've heard about here today, and I just encourage people to find them. With Teals, typically we do most of our recruiting of volunteers in the spring, but we always have a few openings, both in physical locations like New York, Bay Area, Seattle, Boston, DC. But we also do, we use technology. We use, Skype and Link and Google Hangouts to teach in remote locations where there's no engineers nearby. We're in rural Kentucky, where we had a school in Alaska last year. So, lots of opportunities to get involved. Check out the Teals website, which is under me there somewhere, tealsk12.org for volunteers. You can email me. You'll find my email address on the site and talk about how to get involved. But I think that the key point is, if any of this is at all interesting, if you're looking to expand your own knowledge, if you want to help other people, get involved. That's the key point.
Awesome, I love it. What about you, Linda? How do you inspire people to be the change and to be a coding buddy in that sense?
Well, I actually wrote a blog post of, if folks are in New York City, there are a lot of great meetups here that I'm a big fan of, like Hacker Hours, Code Crew, I guess different hackathons. I started Code Buddies as my, personally, I was looking for study partners because I was in the middle of trying to get better at Python and Django and prototypal JavaScript, and so it's written. So if you want to, I guess, experiment with Hangouts, just feel free to visit codebuddies.org. And oh yeah, and I guess I blog at thecodingdiaries.com, which is where you can find the blog posts about different New York City meetups. But yeah, I encourage people to just not be afraid to throw themselves out there and go to events, even if you feel like you might not be as advanced as you think you should be.
Yeah, awesome. And then I think we already talked about exactly this with respect to open source, right? If you want to get involved, start working with things, start working the tools until you break them, and then fix them, and then give your fixes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So thanks. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with us today. Thank you very much to our panelists for spending time with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who is watching now or in the future. And
Next week, we're going to have a very special edition of the Think Tanks. It's going to be on Wednesday, and recapping Apple's big announcement that we don't know what's happening, but we may kind of know. So get excited and stay tuned for that on Wednesday instead of Friday. We're looking forward to chatting. Thank you again, guys. It's been a blast.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Thanks, everyone.